Hello and welcome to our all candidates meeting for the Bay of Quinte riding here, hosted on your TV. I am your moderator for today's event, Paul Martin, also co-host of our regular show here on your TV, Beyond the Politics, airing on Wednesday and also on weekends. But today, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about democracy, the very foundation of Canadian society. We have with us here four of the candidates in the Bay of Quinte riding. I will introduce them in a moment. During today's debate, we will have 1 minute answers to questions, chance for rebuttals and closing statements, but no opening statements, and a chance for you, the voter in the Bay of Quinte region, to get a better chance to learn what your candidates have to say about themselves, their parties, their policies, and their plans for this, one of the most beautiful areas in the entire nation. Without further ado, I will introduce the candidates in the Bay of Quinte riding. They had a draw before this debate to determine the speaking order, and that is also the order in which they'll be introduced, in which they will answer the first question. First up, candidate for the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, Todd Smith. Second, Liberal Party candidate Emily Leneveux. Third, NDP candidate Alison Kelly. And in the fourth chair for today's event, Green Party candidate Erica Charlton. Without further ado, we'll get right into the first question for today's event, which is on COVID. Ontarians want to know what the long-term plan is for dealing with COVID-19. If elected, what approach would your party take to balance the well-being of the community and the safety of all residents? First, to respond to this question, candidate Smith. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for hosting this, Your TV. To continue to follow the science, it's the way we've been operating for the last 2 and a bit years. But the main thing we have to do is ensure that we can keep our economy open and no longer have to go back into lockdown again. We're in a far better place now than we were back when March 2020 hit. We now have vaccines. We now have PPE. We know a lot more about how COVID-19 operates, how it spreads. And we're adding the health human resources that we needed at the time and just didn't have through accelerated PSW programs, additional nursing schools, making sure that we have that resource available to us. They're the ones that have been working so hard throughout the last 2 and a bit years dealing with COVID-19 on the front lines. We need to make sure we have more of them, and we're continuing to add them every day. But we certainly know a lot more now than we did just over 2 years ago when COVID-19 arrived on our shores.
Thank you. Answering this question second, candidate Leneveux. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. Such an important question during this very difficult time. COVID-19 as a biotechnologist is something that I watched very closely and studied very closely, and the Ontario Liberal Party will follow the science. We will focus on what matters, keeping people healthy and safe as we finish the fight against this virus. To that end, an Ontario Liberal government will continue to combat vaccine misinformation and support businesses that opt to check for vaccine status. We also want to guard against future risks. Of course, we know a virus, like any other, will mutate. I believe we're now potentially on our 7th mutation internationally that has been prevalent in Canada. So we need to ensure that we are permanently increasing lab testing capacities, stockpiling rapid tests for our public sector, and ensuring that we build a pandemic resilience hub that must be reviewed and updated annually. We also know that Ontarians need to heal and rebuild trust, and we will work with them to restore confidence in our health system. Thank you.
Answering this question third, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you, Paul. The first thing we're going to do is ensure the thousands of Ontarians who suffered from long COVID are no longer on their own. We're going to make sure they are supported by their primary care providers and broader health teams on their path to recovery. And we're going to invest in research to better understand the causes, symptoms, and treatments. We're going to do a public inquiry into COVID-19. We're going to introduce a new Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. We're going to ensure Ontario is prepared for future public health emergencies by introducing 10 paid sick days, retention pay, PPE stockpiles. We're going to stop the suspensions of evictions during pandemics and healthcare emergencies. We're going to triage protocols accountable to vulnerable communities in Ontario. And last, we're going to properly invest in healthcare, senior care, and education. Thank you.
Answering this first question in fourth chair, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thanks so much. When we think about what happened in the past few years, we want to address the issues from the bottom up. And we can all agree that there was a lack of communication and a lack of leadership when dealing with COVID restrictions. We want to be clear on our messages that anything that we're putting forward is to protect our people. We want to review the COVID restrictions that have already been put in place and take a look at their effectiveness. What worked? What didn't work? What negatively affected our economy? And what could we have done better? The priority was always to protect our healthcare system, and we tried as hard as we could. It was a difficult time for all of us, and I think that going forward as we deal with new issues and new pandemics, and we can do better by working together to find the right solutions this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Second question today is about the economy. In some cases, businesses have had to shut down due to staff shortages. What can be done, in your opinion, to help improve the skilled workforce in the region? Answering this question first, candidate Loneview. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you so much. It's imperative that we fill the labor shortage, the skilled labor shortage right here in the Bay of Quinte and across Ontario. Working with the Centre for Workforce Development, the QHBA, the Quinte Home Builders Association, and so many local organizations, I know that we can do it, but I know that it will be a challenge. That's one of the reasons that the Ontario Liberals have signed an affordability pledge that not only will make life more affordable for individuals, but also for those businesses that very much need those supports. We know that during the pandemic, unfortunately, a lot of Ontario wasn't open for business, and we prioritized the big box stores, the mega grocers. You could go to Walmart. I did all of my shopping through Walmart pickup, driving up with my mask, wishing I could go into a local business with 2, 3, or 4 other individuals to support that local business. Now, we also need to support micro businesses. That's a category of business that was completely neglected and often, unfortunately, did not qualify for grants or loans and services under the government. So I really hope that the Ontario Liberal Party plan is one that you will read and one that you will see support for all business. Thank you.
Thank you. Answering this question second, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. For years, it has been harder and harder to afford the life we're working hard for, and jobs just aren't paying the bills like they used to. As I mentioned a couple of times, for me, that means having 3 jobs, and my husband has 2 lines of income. So as a family, we have 5, and that is unacceptable. The NDP, we're on the side of workers and local businesses. We have a path to a $20 minimum wage in our first term. We're going to commit to 10 permanent paid sick days. We're going to commit to an Ontario manufacturing strategy that will retain good jobs. We're going to create 1 million jobs as part of the Green New Democratic Deal. We're going to attract talent and immigration by prioritizing a system that recognizes the skills and credentials of foreign educated workers with a focus on healthcare. And last, more high school trades and shop classes need to be happening. We're going to promote that and work closely with school boards to expand opportunities for hands-on learning and shop classes. Thank you.
Thank you. Answering this question third, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
Right now, we have a huge population that are unable to work based on barriers that we've put up for them. We have 50% of our population women who can't afford daycare. If we want to build our workforce and we want to eliminate the shortages, we got to do a couple things. One, we need to get daycare available and affordable for more people. We need to make sure that people can have homes in the areas that we need them to work. In addition to that, we want to make sure that people can get there. So you can get to daycare, you can get to work, and you can get yourself home, all within a reasonable amount of money. I talked to a constituent the other day who told me that she spends over $400 just trying to get around town without a vehicle. And I think that's the same circumstance for a lot of people. So again, our plan, break down the barriers that are preventing our existing constituents from entering the workforce, and we'll see a lot of action.
Thank you. Final response on this, the second question of today's event. Candidate Smith, you have 1 minute starting now.
And I agree with Erica, getting more women into the workforce and having affordable childcare is key, and that's why we took the time to ensure that we got the best deal possible with the federal government on the childcare negotiations, so there will be $10 a day childcare in Ontario. We've also invested in the Skills Development Fund in numerous areas. Elevate Plus is one local example, a cooperative between Loyalist College and Quinte Economic Development Commission and the Quinte Manufacturers Association, where individuals who are on social assistance assistants are learning the soft skills that they need and then getting jobs immediately on the floors at many of our local manufacturers and getting back up on their feet. That's just one example of skills development funding being put to good work, ensuring that we have the workers that we need, because that's the biggest issue that I hear from job creators in our region. Access to people. Skilled trades is essentially important, and that's why we've expanded the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program back to grade 9 in our high schools to introduce young people to skilled trades earlier.
Thank you. The third question, staying within the bounds of the economy, but changing tack slightly. Access to high-speed internet has become an essential part of life. What is your plan to make sure our region is competitive with access to proper high-speed internet for all residents and businesses? Answering this question first, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
Yes, thank you. There I am. Yes, high-speed internet is vital. I think we saw during the pandemic that broadband internet is an essential service. I had 2 kids at home doing online learning. I was working full-time from home, and the internet was just not working for us. The Ontario NDP, we have committed to making sure 95% of Ontario has broadband internet by 2025 and all of Ontario by 2026. We believe, again, it is an essential service, and we need to do more to make sure everyone has access to this, to the internet. Thank you.
Answering this question second, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
I think during the pandemic, we all realized that a lot of jobs can be made remote. And if more jobs can be made remote, that means that more people are able to access the workforce. Canada's huge. We all know this. Ontario has population distributed all over, and sometimes it's very difficult either to get a vehicle to come into town or even to have transit to provide that kind of service for you. The Green Party wants to make sure that all rural residents have access to high-speed internet, not just new developments. We have lots of parts of the city already where one side of the road has satellite or no internet, and the other side of the road has high speed or fibe. And that kind of equity disparity is something that we want to fix. Again, if we want a valuable, quality workforce, we're going to have to make sure that everybody has the same access to the same tools to make sure that the playing field is level for everybody.
Thank you. Answering this question third, candidate Smith. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thanks, Paul. This work is already underway to ensure that 100% of Ontario residents have access to high-speed internet by 2025. The reverse auction that we've implemented with ISPs, those internet service providers working closely with the LDCs, the local distribution companies, is already underway. As Minister of Energy, I was able to reduce pole fee costs to make it more affordable for those ISPs to get their hardware onto poles with hydro companies right across Ontario to ensure that we're getting that work done. We've invested 2 budgets ago $4 billion, which is a massive, massive investment. And Erica talks about how big Canada is. Ontario is enormous too. The federal government has contributed $1.5 billion to make this happen. We've contributed $4 billion already to get high-speed internet to students, small business people, families and farms right across Ontario. This is the future. People want to work at home, and we're going to make it happen.
Final response to this, our third question of today's event, candidate Lonavue. You have 1 minute starting now.
Yes, and I think we all can agree that we need broadband high-speed internet across Ontario, but especially in our rural communities. To Erica's point, there are so many jobs that can go remote, and there are so many jobs that I hope remain remote for the environmental impact, for the impact on families, being able to stay home, being able to stay with loved ones. Again, to Erica's point, with having a street with 5 internet on one side and low speed on the other, I worked for an organization down on Main Street in Picton, the Naval Marine Archive, and they had a fiber optics box quite literally 10 meters away from their establishment, from the organization, but we weren't able to use it for logistical reasons and the red tape that unfortunately does still exist. All governments have promised to give us this access, and it's time that we actually achieve this access. Like the Conservatives, we are promising by 2025, the Ontario Liberal Party is going to provide broadband internet, high-speed internet for all, especially our rural communities. Thank you.
Our next question is actually a video question submitted by a member of our community that I'm sure everyone on this panel and most people watching would be familiar with. So without further ado, this question is from Mr. Doug Stevenson. It's about staff and customer service.
Hey folks, Doug Stevenson here with the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board. Thanks so much for the ability to submit a question. So my question is this, we work so much in the tourism sector in this organization, and a huge part of the tourism sector is customer service. Would you believe it? Recent data shows in this region over 80% of the jobs in the Bay of Quinte are customer service related. But at the same time, there's a customer service crisis going on right now. There aren't enough people to fill the positions. Individuals coming up aren't seeing this as a viable career anymore. So my question is, how do you propose to work with post-secondary institutions and secondary schools to shift that thinking and also to support students to go into customer service programs and graduate into positions that are going to help move our tourism economy in the province of Ontario?
Thank you, Doug, for that very thoughtful question. Next, in order to first response, candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute to respond to that inquiry, starting now.
Great. I'd like to, again, go to what the roots of these issues are. Why do people not want to enter the service industry? Well, for the most part, they're getting minimum wage. And as we all know, minimum wage, 40 hours a week, only equates to about $600 before taxes. Take that over 4 weeks for a month, people still can't afford rent. So we either have to do two things. We either have to make life more affordable for them or give them more money per month. It's very simple. I think one of the easiest ways to do that would be affordable homes. Reducing the cost of transit, reducing the cost of housing will allow people the opportunity to take the jobs that we need them to take to keep our economy running. If we're not going to provide them with the services that they require to do this, they're not going to enter the jobs that we need. Our busiest street with so many job opportunities, you can see, not a single housing unit in that entire region. Where are they supposed to live if you want them to work there? That's the end.
Second response to this question, candidate Smith, you have 1 minute starting now.
Well, thanks, Paul. And we did move the minimum wage, not just for minimum wage earners, but for servers, the server wage up to $15.50 an hour, which should help. But we have to ensure that we're training our young people and those who want to get into culinary services and service jobs, the training that they need. I was pleased a couple of weeks ago to announce funding for Waring House, a restaurant, which I believe we all know in Prince Edward County. It's one of the staples of Prince Edward County culinary. It's been there for 25 years. They now have a school along with Loyalist College, where the chefs and other guest chefs coming into the area are training people in the culinary sector. We also announced last year a brand new culinary school for Loyalist College. They're taking the old Club 213, which I think most of us know as well, moving it across the hallway, opening it up to have a beautiful restaurant at Loyalist College where students can actually get the practical experience that they need both in the kitchen and on the front lines serving individuals.
Thank you. Third response, candidate Lonavue, you have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. Every Ontarian deserves the opportunity to succeed, no matter their age, no matter their career, no matter what they want to go into. And that's why we're making strategic investments when it comes to our students and when it comes to individuals who want a career in customer service. We also look to implement 10 paid sick days, but we want to move away from the minimum wage that we're seeing right now and implement a regional livable wage, a wage that everyone can afford to live on and that's regionally based. So in the Bay of Quinte, it costs maybe more or less than the regions that are around us. We know this. That's why a regional wage is so important. We also want to incorporate portable benefits. And what that means is if you're a gig economy worker or perhaps you're working 3-4 jobs in customer service, you don't have to worry about not having that one full-time job with your benefits. I also want to touch on OSAP. I think OSAP loans or a lot of our grants unfortunately have been converted to loans over the past 4 years. We're going to freeze tuition and double the amount of OSAP that our Ontarian families are receiving. Thank you.
Thank you. Fourth response to this question, candidate Kelly, you have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. I ran into a youth last weekend who actually had to quit Loyalist College because they couldn't afford the tuition after 1 year. And that is the reality for so many students in our community. Ontario invests nearly 50% less than the provincial average in Canada and in post-secondary education, and has the lowest per student funding. Doug Ford has made it hard for students by cutting OSAP, making it hard to qualify for loans, and they eliminated interest-free grace period. And why are we saddling students with debt? How are they going to get into good-paying jobs when they can't go to post-secondary education? Education is the great equalizer. We need to prioritize it as such. The NDP, we're going to eliminate interest rates on loans, and we're going to convert loans into grants to eliminate graduating with student debt. And we're going to continue to support wraparound supports for our youth with local agencies and educators to ensure they get the support they need to make their goals possible. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of our first 4 questions. We're going to be taking a break. You are watching the all candidates meeting for this Bay of Quinte riding election, provincial, of course, on your TV. Before we do that, here at your TV, we have a commitment to democracy. 2 candidates in this riding are not at this all candidates meeting, but they were offered a chance to record a statement so they can also have something to say to you, the people who are going to be able to vote on June 2nd or before. One chose to take advantage of that opportunity. So without further ado, here's a pre-recorded message from Ontario Party candidate Noah Wales. And then we'll be right back after a brief break.
Have you been dissatisfied with the current government for the past 4 years? Well, 75% of people in Ontario have been, and I'm one of them. Hi, I'm Noah Wales. I'm your candidate for the Bay of Quinte, representing the Ontario Party. We stand for freedom, faith, and family. If you want freedom from the WEF, from censorship, from media propaganda, and from the digital ID, if you want freedom for your faith, where to practice it, and to come together as a community again, and to worship, then you should have that. If you're a parent, then you should be making the medical decisions for your children, not the government. The Ontario Party will be looking in to get removing the inappropriate sexual education system and critical race theory. Now is the time to stand up. Now is the time to fight. If these values are important to you, then come down on June 2nd and vote for change.
Welcome back to your vote on your TV, our all candidates meeting for provincial candidates in the Bay of Quinte riding. I am your moderator for this event, Paul Martin, also host of Beyond the Politics, also right here on your TV. We've been through the first 4 questions and we'll now dive right back into it, resuming with the first person to answer this question being candidate Smith. The rising cost of food is becoming a real issue for people in low-income situations. What is your party's plan to address this issue? Again, candidate Smith, first to answer. You have 1 minute, starting now.
Well, certainly one of the key pillars of our platform is to drive down the costs that people in Ontario are experiencing. One of them is lowering the gas prices from 5.7 cents a litre starting on July the 1st. But we took action 4 years ago to lower gas prices. And keep in mind that lowering the gas prices should mean lower costs for everything. All food, everything we have in the area gets transported by truck. And the other 3 candidates that are here are in full support of carbon taxes and actually, in some cases, drastically increased carbon taxes. And carbon tax increases result in higher costs on everything. And it's not just a byproduct of it, it's the intent of a carbon tax. That's why we fought the carbon tax all the way to the Supreme Court. We know there are people struggling right now. We have to stop increasing taxes. We have to stop increasing fees, and that's why we're so focused on lowering taxes and lowering fees, including the low-income individual and family tax credit.
Thank you. Answering this question second, candidate Lanavue. You have 1 minute, starting now.
Yes, and affordability is such an important topic and question, but just to clarify some misinformation, the carbon tax doesn't cost families more. In fact, it's put into place to target mega polluters, and you receive a carbon tax rebate. Most families do. 8 in 10 families will receive a carbon tax rebate that actually negates any increases you see at the pumps. And the Ontario Liberal Party is also committed on July 1st to cutting the gas tax by that 5.7 cents. In terms of our plan for affordability, I'm really excited that the Ontario Liberal Party is going to remove the provincial portion of HST on any prepared foods, because we know that other foods, organic foods, already don't have HST, but for any prepared foods up to $20, the amount right now is $4, we're going to increase that to 20. So you're going to see 8% relief on any purchase under $20, whether you're grabbing a rotisserie chicken for your family, whether you're doing a coffee run for your coworkers, you're going to get 8% relief on food. Thank you.
Answering third, candidate Kelly, you have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. I've mentioned this before, but food insecurity is an ongoing issue. And it was decades ago that food banks were put into practice to support the economy at that time. Yet here we are, because government after government are not doing the work to fix the problem. Let's talk about this gas tax that both Doug Ford and Del Duca tell you they will pause for a couple of years. This does not prevent big oil and big gas companies from continuing to raise the rates. The NDP wants to stop that. They are making so much money off of you and me, and it's unacceptable. We're going to mandate the Ontario Energy Board to regulate the retail price and wholesale markup of petroleum products in Ontario, and we're going to ensure that prices are fair and competitive, regardless of where you live, and it will protect us from price gouging at the gas pumps. Thank you.
Before we proceed to our fourth response, I believe I saw candidate Smith hand go up for a rebuttal. You have 30 seconds starting now.
I just want to point out that regulating gas prices like the NDP are proposing actually drives up the cost at the pumps. And this isn't just the PC party or Doug Ford or Todd Smith, the energy minister, saying this. This is a study that was done by the Ontario Energy Board. All jurisdictions that have regulated prices are actually paying more for the cost of gasoline. That includes all of the maritime provinces and NDP British Columbia. Believe it or not, our prices are lower than those jurisdictions.
You have an opportunity to have a response to that rebuttal, which is 15 seconds. It may be brief, but if you wish, candidate Kelly, you may do that starting now.
All I will say is in 2018, as an election promise, Doug Ford said, if the NDP has a chance to govern, the gas prices will soar to $20 a litre. Yet here we are. Thank you.
Back to our original question, fourth response and final to this one. Candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
Well, I hope I addressed the question that we talked about.
Would you like it restated?
Yes, please.
The rising cost of food is becoming a real issue for people in low-income situations. What is your party's plan to deal with this issue?
Okay, so I really appreciate, or don't appreciate, that our responses so far have been about the blame game. Who do we blame for the rising costs that we have to deal with, instead of talking about what solutions are required? Immediately, we need to help farmers get off of the rising costs of fossil fuel by providing them with subsidiary options for green technology, making their workforce more green and more affordable. When we do that, we reduce the cost that farmers have and makes it easier for them to get their products onto Canadian tables. And that's the other thing, localizing our industry. A lot of our food costs are associated with the fact that we transport so much into the country, into the province, and into town, when we don't have to. If we did a better job protecting our farmlands from development and making sure that our farmers are taken care of and that they have plans to pass their farm on to future generations, we're going to fix the problem quickly, not by blaming people.
Reminder again to candidates, if at any point you need any question restated because perhaps we've gotten slightly off topic or there's an exchange or rebuttal, you may always ask myself, the moderator, and I will gladly reread it for you. Question number 6. Over the last decade, we've seen a constant move to download infrastructure costs to municipalities. If elected, how would you work with local municipalities to ensure they have the necessary funds to fix deteriorating infrastructure without putting more pressure on taxpayers locally? First, to answer this question, candidate Lonavue. You have 1 minute starting now.
It was a distinct honor to be one of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's first Youth Fellows, where I first learned about uploading and downloading and all of the things that our mayors have to face. I was lucky enough to be mentored by the mayor of Innisfil, and all of the things that I learned from her, I now hear from mayors right here in Belleville and Prince Edward County and Trenton. And the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to work with our municipalities to ensure that we aren't downloading these infrastructure costs, that when it comes to our roads, we're being collaborative. And the Ontario Liberal Party wants to work with every single one of our 444 municipalities to make sure that we're uploading the costs and we're giving the relief that they need. Thank you.
Second response to this question, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. First, we're going to pass Bill 21, the Municipal Representation Protection Act, which requires the government to give public notice, conduct consultations, and get the approval of municipalities before cutting the size of councils, changing, amalgamating, or dissolving wards. We're going to strengthen municipal decision-making. We're going to look for ways to do that by including city charters and recognize and support municipal legitimate powers. We're going to reverse the Ford Doug's unfair downloading of public health care costs and restore the province's traditional share of funding for local public health units. And we're going to restore the province's traditional 50% funding for municipal transit and paratransit operations and ensure immediate improvements to transit and paratransit service. Now, we're likely going to hear about Highway 41 and the expansions around here, but let me tell you, if Bradford Bypass and 413 are happening, those highways will not happen. Being in the plan just means that the municipality can apply for that funding. It doesn't guarantee anything. Thank you.
Third response to this question, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
First thing we're going to do is alleviate some of the pressure that municipalities have with their transit. We're going to take 50% of those costs and bring them back up to the provincial level. From there, we're going to get everybody at the table and start discussing what affordable housing needs to be, where it's going to go up, and who it's going to help the most immediately. And then from there, I think that the best thing that we could do is get rid of some of the most recent gimmicks that we've had done provincially that are actually draining money that could be used for better projects, retrofitting our schools, retrofitting our existing infrastructure to actually help the people. Canceling a $10 billion highway that isn't going to benefit people who want smaller class sizes or a roof that doesn't leak at their schools. These are the kind of decisions that we need to make quickly, and we're going to do it with the Green Party of Ontario. Thanks.
Final response on this question, candidate Smith. You have 1 minute starting now.
Well, thanks. And the question was about building infrastructure that our communities need and repairing infrastructure that our communities need. We've never had a better relationship with our 444 municipalities than we have right now. They're working with us so closely because we've invested in the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund to record amounts. The ISIP program, a three-way level of funding, the Investing in Canada Infrastructure program is going to see things get done like County Road 49 in Prince Edward County. But we've already budgeted for the 401 widening through Eastern Ontario, including the Quinte region, which is next on the agenda. I know it's the biggest ask of our mayors in Quinte West and Belleville and the Eastern Ontario Mayors Council to get that 401 widened to 6 lanes right through Quinte. Working with Mayor Panchuk in Belleville, getting that Belleville East arterial route done. That new interchange off the 401 at the east end of town has been budgeted for, and we're going to get it done. We're going to make it happen.
Thank you. The seventh question of today's event is on, surprise, surprise, gasoline prices. Gasoline in Ontario has more than doubled in price versus the lowest prices we saw back in 2020, just 2 years ago. If elected, how would your party help drivers and families through this challenging period of inflated prices in general? First to respond to this, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. I think it's important to recognize that in our community, people rely on transportation. Many jobs won't hire you if you don't have your G license or you don't have a reliable car. There are many people in our community who are not paying car insurance because that's money they need to feed their family, that they need to pay their rent. So I've already talked about what we're going to do about gasoline and the prices, and I'm just going to repeat them for you all. We're going to mandate the Ontario Energy Board to regulate the retail price and wholesale markup of petroleum products in Ontario. And we're going to ensure the prices are fair and competitive. $2.07 to fill up your car is unacceptable. And being given gas stickers on license plates is not going to change my mind. It's not going to help us. What are we doing to help the people who need their cars to get to work, who need their cars to drive their kids to school, who need their cars to get to doctor's appointments. It needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed now. Thank you.
Second response to this question, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
So I'm going to go in a completely different direction from this. I understand that gas prices are high, but we're focusing on subsidizing a limited resource. And anytime any business practice knows that when you're not going to get a supply anymore, you need to find alternative ways to make your business work. And if we want to look at Ontario in that way, why are we not taking the fuel subsidies we have now and pushing them into a better transit system that more people can utilize? Why are we not subsidizing electric vehicles so that we can get more fossil fuel cars off the road? It's not going to solve the problem by keeping Band-Aids on it with financial solutions, because like gasoline, finances run out. What we can do instead is provide a green economy that's profitable. And when it becomes profitable, we can use those resources and sell them outside of our province to solve other provinces' problems that they're having as well, because this is not a lone issue to us. This is worldwide. Thank you.
Third response to this question, candidate Smith. You have 1 minute starting now.
This is a worldwide issue, there's no question about it, and the invasion in Ukraine has only made it worse. However, we can do things at the provincial level and our own federal level to reduce the cost of gasoline in our province. While we're in this inflationary time and while we have this crisis around the world, the federal Liberal government has increased the carbon tax on April 1st to make the price of gas and everything else even more expensive. That's why, and I've already talked about reducing the cost of gasoline that will come into effect on July 1st temporarily, but it's the other reason why we've introduced the license plate sticker fee reduction. That's one way that the federal government or other gasoline companies can't get their hands on that rebate. We're giving motorists a direct refund on their license plate sticker fees, and depending on how many vehicles you have, it's made a big impact on families. We've also reduced tolls to make driving less expensive. Our party is focused on making life more affordable for Ontarians. The others, not so much.
Fourth and final response to this question, candidate Lonavue. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. I'm not sure why Minister Smith says the others aren't interested in affordability. We're all interested in the environment and affordability. And as I said earlier, 8 out of 10 families are going to get the carbon tax back in their pockets, the amount that they're spending or more. That's 80% of Ontarians. And I think we can tax the other 20%, the mega polluters. I think that's important. But to get back to the question, when it comes to affordability, I'm also really excited about the Ontario Liberal plan to reinstate the electric vehicle incentive that was lost. In 2016, I was able to buy an electric vehicle through the $11,000 incentive of the former Liberal government. And now I'm not a federal Liberal, I'm a provincial Liberal, and I'm talking about provincial incentives now. We're going to reinstate that incentive to the tune of $8,000 to partner with our federal Liberals who already have an incentive at $5,000 to negate the fact that the Ford administration had removed this incentive earlier on in their term. Now, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to slash transit fares to $1, taking off 400,000 cars from the road. So if you get on the GO train or if you get on municipal transit, it's going to cost $1.
And that's time. Thank you. Question number 8 of today's All Candidates meeting here in the Bay of Quinte region. There's an affordable housing crisis here, both in the province and definitely right here in the Quinte region itself. How will your party encourage home ownership at a reasonable cost without taking shortcuts? First response to this question, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
The affordable housing crisis has a lot to do with lack of units and the disparity of who's able to afford a unit and who can't. First thing we're going to do is put up 182,000 affordable rental units in this province. What that means is that people are going to be able to bank money for their future home purchases if that's what their plan is. With our current system, most people are struggling to pay the rent, feed their family, and maybe get a car on the road. The thought of home ownership is way down. By creating 15-minute communities that are dense, where people can walk to work, where people can take transit to get to daycare, to work, back to home, people are going to be able to save a lot more money. Reducing the affordability or increasing the affordability within our area is the key to making sure that people have options and that one of those options will be future home ownership. So thanks.
Second response to this question, candidate Smith. You have 1 minute starting now.
Well, we have a plan, Paul, and it's working. There have been 8 different pieces of legislation on housing brought forward in the last 4 years, and we're seeing the results of that. Last year, we saw over 100,000 housing starts in our province, which is a record, and that was during a pandemic. So imagine where we'll be at this year, as long as we have the skilled tradespeople to make sure we can build those houses. We have to get away from this NIMBYism. There's a new term called bananas out there, build absolutely nothing near anyone. And we have to get away from that. We have to build homes. We need them. Not just single family homes, we need rental homes. And because of some of the legislation we brought in, we're seeing rental homes built for the first time since 1993 in our province. Lots of them here in the Quinte area as well. But we have to build community housing, like the kind of stuff that Phil Spry is building with the Back to Home project. We have to ensure that municipalities have shovel-ready projects so that we can get them the funding from the social services relief funds so they can build those homes. And we have to see expansion like the Black Bear Ridge project in Thurlow.
Third response to this question, candidate Loneview. You have 1 minute starting now.
I'm glad that we have provincial programs in place to tackle the issue of supply. But now that we have these these rental units available, they aren't affordable. And not only that, the Ford administration removed the rent control in Ontario, meaning that we have perhaps a few extra units, but no one can afford them. I brought a friend to view a unit yesterday, and it was $1,100, and it was quite literally probably the size of this studio with very limited appliances, and utilities weren't included, and this was considered affordable housing. We're definitely struggling in the Bay of Quinte and across Ontario, and we need to re-implement rent control. Now, when it comes to housing itself, the Ontario Liberal Party does plan on building 1.5 million homes over 10 years. Not 1.5, I said that the other day, 1.5 million homes. And I know that that's an ambitious goal. It's doubling our current target. It's doubling our current trends. But it's the goal that we need to achieve in order to fix this housing crisis once and for all, and then continue to look at it. We can't just turn a blind eye. This is a crisis that we need to evaluate day after day.
Thank you. Fourth and final response on this, and before we take another break, candidate Kelly, you have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. For decades, Conservative and Liberal governments have made the housing crisis increasingly worse. You just have to walk up to Macaulay Village, the Heights in the county, to see a displacement project on full display during a pandemic. Families being evicted, and they have nowhere to go. They are leaving our communities. They are leaving their schools. They are leaving the agencies that are working with them to make sure they accomplish the goals they want. Ontario NDP, we will repair 260,000 social housing units. We will build 250,000 affordable and non-market homes over the decade to be operated by public, not-profit, and co-op housing providers. We're going to end exclusionary zoning and enable affordable missing middle homes like duplexes, townhomes, and walk-up apartments. We're going to regulate short-term rentals. We're going to make sure that we are dealing with the annual speculation and vacancy tax on residential property. And the one I'm most excited about is we're going to create an Indigenous by Indigenous housing strategy, working in partnership with Indigenous-led housing providers and the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll take another quick break. You are watching Your Vote, Your TV's coverage of our local all candidates meeting in the Bay of Quinte region. Again, this is on Your TV. And welcome back to Your Vote, Your TV's coverage of this all candidates meeting for candidates in the Bay of Quinte riding in the current provincial election campaign. I am your host, moderator Paul Martin, also host of Beyond the Politics, which also airs coincidentally right here on Your TV. We'll get right back into it. We've had 2 segments already. This will be our final one, which will proceed with our remaining questions and then right into our closing statements. We shift candidates to the area of health with our next question, certainly something of concern to everyone at some level or another. In our region, many residents have no access to a primary care physician. If elected, how would your government ensure all residents have easy and equal access to health care? First response to this nebulous question, candidate Smith, you have 1 minute starting now.
So we're working on this, and we put new programs in place to ensure that we have more primary care physicians and frontline nurses in our area. Nurse practitioners can do much of the work that a family physician can do. We've expanded the Queen's Medical School and all medical schools right across the province. Those medical spaces were capped by the previous Liberal government. We're unleashing that opportunity to have those doctors from Queen's and other schools working right here in our brand new Prince Edward County Memorial Hospital that we're building, the Trenton Memorial Hospital that's no longer on a shaky foundation thanks to the fact that we've invested in the funding formula, or actually fixed the funding formula, which hurt that hospital. But we're also training more nurses as well. It's important to have more nurses. 300 of them will be trained every year at Loyalist College in the new standalone nursing program, and then PSWs and the accelerated programs at places like Loyalist College and Loyola as well, run by the Algonquin Lakeshore Catholic School Board. So making sure we're increasing health human resources is key.
Second response to this question about healthcare, candidate Line of View. You have 1 minute starting now.
Well, the first thing that we'll do as Ontario Liberals is repeal Bill 124. No reason to have a 1% age cap on our nurses and a plethora of other support workers that are quite literally the heroes of our healthcare system. The heroes that everyone called them in the beginning, unfortunately, were capped by 1% at the beginning of the pandemic. We also need to ensure that mental health supports are available for those professionals. We're going to hire and train 100,000 nurses and doctors, and the way we're going to ensure that our rural ridings benefit from that is if you are a medical or nursing student who wishes to study outside of our riding but come back to a rural riding, and I hope it's the Bay of Quinte, but to any rural riding or to Northern Ontario, we will pay the tuition for your medical or nursing school, because it's imperative that we fill the gaps and that every single person has access to a doctor or nurse within 24 hours, and that's the Ontario Liberal promise. Thank you.
Third response to this question, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. Decades of critical services were cut before the pandemic, and the pandemic exposed these gaps to all of us when we saw a refusal to invest in hospitals and healthcare. Bill 124 is the most atrocious bill, and if I may be frank, it's a sexist bill, because there are women who are predominantly in the fields that got impacted by this bill. We're going to get rid of it. We're going to attract doctors and nurses by recruiting them and retaining and returning nurses. One thing we're going to do is prioritize a system that recognizes skills and credentials of foreign workers with a focus on healthcare. During the pandemic, a local doctor wanted to go help, but he couldn't because he wasn't from Ontario. He wasn't from Canada. He had to wait to get into the hospital. We are also going to 10 paid sick days. Should be a given. It should have happened. Should have happened. And we're going to add 10,000 PSWs and 30 nurses and introduce a really cool mentoring program by bringing back retired nurses to support the new nurses that started their career during the pandemic. Thank you.
Fourth and final response to this question on the state of healthcare, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
The best thing that we could do for our healthcare is recruit new people and old people who have left our healthcare industry because of how bad it is. By repealing Bill 124, we'll be able to allow nurses to get the wages they deserve and come back to the bargaining table to make sure that not only are they getting paid, but they're also receiving the benefits that they need to do their job properly. To make sure that when they show up at work, they're happy, they're not tired, and they're not impeding on people's care because of the fact that we're not taking care of them.
Candidate Smith has requested a rebuttal to something in candidate Charlton's statement. You have 30 seconds, candidate Smith, for your rebuttal. Please go ahead.
Well, when I talk to nurses, what they're telling me is that they're tired and they don't have the backup that they need. That's why it's imperative that we're training nurses locally, but training thousands of them right across the province, because they're getting burnt out. There's just not enough. There was too much neglect over the last 15 years when it came to hiring. We saw 1,600 nurses laid off or fired in our province, including many here at Quinte Healthcare. I stood in the legislature year after year at the end of the year talking about the nurses that were being fired.
Thank you. Candidate Loneview has requested clarification, not a rebuttal, to candidate Smith's statement. We will allow that, but first, standard protocol indicates a response to the original rebuttal must take place first. Candidate Charlton, you have 15 seconds to respond to Candidate Smith's statement starting now.
Okay, thank you for emphasizing my point and not necessarily rebutting anything that I said. When I talked to my doctor and I asked, what can we do to bring more doctors to this area? He said, make it a better work environment at the hospital because we have residents coming in who leave and never want to come back to Belleville because of how bad it is here and how angry people are and how unhappy nurses are when they show up.
And that's 15 seconds. Thank you. As a point of thank you for attempting to clarify what a rebuttal is. A rebuttal is, however, in the judgment of the moderator. That was borderline. Candidate Smith as an original rebuttal, but was acceptable. In response to that, we've requested a clarification from Candidate Lanavu. Since you responded to a 30-second statement, you have 15 seconds to make your point, starting now.
Ontario's aging population has set a huge burden on our healthcare system. But I just want to emphasize that the Ontario Liberal Party team is a brand new team, and a lot of the numbers that we're hearing tonight aren't the real numbers from the Ontario Liberal Party's record, and I would put our record up against the Ford Conservatives' last 4 years any day. Thank you.
Proceeding on now to the next question. We will return to healthcare. It is a big subject, but first, we would be remiss if we did not spur into education, which of course is the other provincial party's biggest mandate. In the field of education, how will your party continue to support public education in Ontario? What is your party's position regarding online courses, particularly in high school years? First, to answer this question, Candidate Lanavu, you have 1 minute starting now.
Yes, education is so important to me, and I know as a recent graduate myself just how difficult online learning is. I was a virtual student before the pandemic, and throwing so many students into this virtual realm without the proper tools was not the way to go, and the same goes for our public education system. We need to strengthen public education when we need to not mandate 2 courses. Before the pandemic, we wanted to mandate here in Ontario 2 virtual courses. We cannot mandate virtual environments, especially given that we don't even have the broadband connection to keep up with it in most homes. But the Ontario Liberal Party wants to focus on in-person learning. We also would have focused on outdoor education over virtual learning because it has been such a detriment to so many families. We're also going to cap class sizes at 20 and hire 5,000 new special education workers. That means 1 education worker or more than 1 per school to alleviate some of the gaps that we're seeing in our learning because of the detrimental virtual learning environments that have been created. Thanks.
Thank you. Second response to this question, Candidate Kelly, you have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. In 2018, it was reported that Bay of Quinte had 76% graduation rate, which is 10% lower than the Ontario average. At no fault to our educators, students, and family. As a trustee, I know very well how terrible the education system responded to the pandemic. Again, at no fault to the school boards, at no fault to the parents, at no fault to the educators. We saw an attack on our educators through the decade salary freeze introduced by Liberals Bill 115 and Doug's Bill 124. In 2017, 5 Bay of Quinte schools were shut down by the Liberals. The Ontario NDP, first thing we're going to do, we're going to eliminate the mandatory online learning. For some students, it worked really well for them, but for many students, it didn't. It should be an option. It should not be mandatory. We're going to hire thousands of teachers and education workers. We're going to cancel EQAO testing. Oh my gosh, we're going to cancel it. And of course, repeal Bill 124. Thank you.
Third response to this question, Candidate Charlton, you have 1 minute starting now.
During the pandemic, we learned a lot. One of them that our internet service is not sufficient for taking everything into an online environment. Now, that's not to say that some people didn't benefit from an online learning environment. And actually, it helps some people who are unable to access great education locally to be provided that service. However, the Green Party wants to make sure that not only do kids have access to great public in-person education, that they have it in an environment that suits them. We're going to invest in retrofitting our infrastructure to make sure that not only is it ready for the new green economy, but it also helps our kids with proper ventilation and making sure that all of our schools have the appropriate accessibility options set up for all of our students to make sure that everyone can enter the schools properly. We're going to cancel EQAO and we're going to reduce their class sizes to 24 and 26 for kindergarten. Thank you.
Final response to this question, Candidate Smith, you have 1 minute starting now.
Well, thanks. We certainly did learn a lot during the pandemic, and I think life is going to change as a result of the pandemic. That's why we need to ensure that our students are able to learn online. They were forced to do it during the pandemic, and as was mentioned, many of them did extremely well. It's important also that we build new schools. The point was made that many schools were closed, particularly in rural Ontario and right here in the Bay of Quinte region. I was out there fighting to keep those schools open, like the one in Sophiasburg, and it took a community effort to ensure that that school stayed open to create a community hub there. But we did see Pinecrest and Bloomfield close. We're building 3 brand new schools in the region, one in Picton, the St. Gregory's Catholic School. We're building a brand new addition to St. Joseph's School in Belleville and a brand new addition at Murray Centennial School as well. It's all about building. We have to ensure that the students have the modern environment so that they can learn in public. And the most important thing is to have our schools open and no more lockdowns. We have to keep our province open.
Thank you. Next question returns to the realm of healthcare. There's something close to everyone's heart: long-term care. Seniors need a safe and affordable long-term care home. How will your government ensure the province's most vulnerable citizens are adequately cared for in their home communities? First response to this question, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
Yes, Doug Fort's Conservatives literally let thousands of people die in long-term care, wave after wave, due to neglect and thirst. These were people's grandparents, mothers, brothers, sisters. They didn't deserve that. In Prince Edward and Belleville, we have 1,548 people waiting for 482 beds. And I know we're going to hear about the PC's plan to build more beds. That's great. But if you don't have the people and pay them properly, they are not going to be there at all. We're going to create 5,000 new spaces and end the wait times. We're going to make the entire system public and not for profit. We're going to implement a standard 4 hours of care per resident immediately. And we're going to hire thousands of PSWs, raise wages by $5 per hour, and make their jobs full-time and better pay. We respect PSWs, we respect the healthcare workers, and they have been told time and time again by this government that they are not worthy of pay, they are not worthy of PPE, they are just not worthy of better.
That's time. Second response, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
We have a huge population that is moving out of the workforce and into a long-term care environment or an at-home care environment for themselves, who have dedicated their entire lives to putting money into this economy, and they deserve to be taken care of now that they've chosen to exit the workforce. What we saw during the pandemic is that the privatized long-term care environments were the worst for our citizens. We had double the amount of people pass away in those environments, and we had to bring in the army to take care of it. How unfortunate. What Green Party wants to do is not only improve the public long-term care environments, we want to make sure that those people who decide that they want to stay in their home, that they worked their entire lives to pay for, have better home care options. And beyond that, their friends or family members who've decided that they might temporarily leave the workforce to ensure that these people who are in the retirement phase have the support they need, also are getting support from our Ontario government to make sure that everybody is taken care of. Thanks.
Next response to this question, candidate Smith. You have 1 minute starting now.
We knew that long-term care was in crisis even before the pandemic, and that's why in 2018 we ran on a pledge to increase the number of long-term care beds by 30,000 across the province, and I'm proud to say there are 30,000 long-term care beds, either new or redeveloped, in the pipeline in Ontario, including 4 brand new homes in the Bay of Quinte region. One of them is municipally run at Picton, H.J. McFarlane Home. We've got Hallowell House in Picton as well. A brand new home is going to be built across from Reed's Dairy in Belleville, and we've got another one that's going to be built here in town as well at Westgate Lodge. And we're ensuring through the programs that we've already instituted that we have those health human resources there. And we've already passed legislation, Bill 106, that's giving those personal support workers and developmental services workers a permanent $3 an hour wage increase, something that has been applauded by those incredibly hardworking individuals that work as PSWs and in our development services sector. So we're on our way to fixing this problem that's been a result of years of neglect.
That's time. Thank you. Final response to this question, candidate Lonnie View. You have 1 minute starting now.
I'm proud of the new team of Ontario Liberals that have come together and met with thousands of stakeholders to get our plan right when it comes to caring for our seniors. We know that the Doug Ford administration has not only let our seniors down, but they've made matters worse. Yes, having beds, having spots is great, but the conditions in which our workers and our seniors are living in is atrocious. My great aunt passed away in long-term care earlier this year, and I saw firsthand just how detrimental it is on, again, the mental health of our workers and our patients. That's why I'm proud of the Ontario Liberal plan to revolutionize healthcare, making sure that every single senior who wants to age at home can age at home, making room for 400,000 folks to age in their homes with dignity, with economic dignity, and with all of the affordability assets that they need through the other parts of our pledge. We also are going to top up the OAS to $1,000, which gives $83 extra in folks' pockets, and we are going to...
And that's time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shifting to the local scene, there was a high-profile announcement not that long ago right here in Belleville, one of the communities, of course, in the Bay of Quinte region. The Ford government recently announced that the plan had been created for the BEAR, the Belleville East Arterial Route, which of course would be a brand new interchange along the 401. We would create a new access point specifically to the east side of the city and the industrial park, relieving congestion, among other things, on the Highway 37 interchange, which is thought to be overly congested currently, and if the new development happens in Thurlow Ward, even more so. If elected, would your party keep the BEAR as part of their official plan moving forward? First response to this, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
Okay, if you're from Corbyville, you know that 37 is pretty busy for the most part. And we keep putting up new developments there. New subdivision just went down the road for me, actually. And we're proposing that Black Bear Ridge gets an entire new development, which is awesome. Except with all these new houses going up, I haven't seen a single bus service been sent out that way. So before we start building over our wetlands and building over our farmlands and creating a worse environment than we already have, how about we add solutions that we know work? And by providing transit, we will take so many cars off the road unnecessarily. With single vehicle travelers constantly going down Highway 37, there are solutions that don't require paving over our environment. Thanks.
Next response, candidate Smith. You have 1 minute starting now.
Well, no offense, but I think we need the houses before we get the transit there. Otherwise, they're going to be empty buses, and that's not going to be great for the environment either. But we are very, very committed to building the Belleville East Arterial Route. Obviously, I've been championing this along with Mayor Panchuk in Belleville and working with my colleagues in Cabinet to ensure that that happens with Premier Ford and Minister Caroline Mulrooney, the Minister of Transportation, who came down and saw just how important it is to have that eastern arterial route so that we can take the traffic off Canifton and bring it directly into the industrial park. Belleville Council has had the foresight to double the size of their industrial park because we're bringing jobs back to Ontario. We're going to bring jobs to the Bay of Quinte. We saw 300,000 jobs leave under the Liberals. We've seen 550,000 jobs created pre and post-pandemic because we put the environment in place for those investments to be made here in Ontario. Massive, record, historic investments by the auto sector over the last number of months in Windsor and Oshawa and numerous other places across Ontario. That's going to continue.
Time. Thank you. Candidate Charlton has requested a rebuttal of candidate Smith's statement. You have 30 seconds starting now.
I am going to take offense, Todd, because at the beginning of the statement I said that there are already houses there that don't have transit. And if we wanted to make sure that they could get to town, we would do that first before putting up more houses with more unaffordable options to get to town. What you're suggesting is that by putting up more houses, more people need to have vehicles, and that's not the solution. Thank you.
Response to the rebuttal, candidate Smith, you have 15 seconds.
Well, certainly we're investing in highways, but we're also investing in transit. Our government, for every dollar that goes into a highway, $3 is going into transit. That's why we've seen the transformation of the Belleville transit system.
Next response to the original question on the BEAR, the Belleville East Arterial Route, and your party's plans to continue or not. Candidate Lanavu, you have 1 minute starting now.
Firstly, I'm not sure where the former Minister of Energy is getting his figures. I think there are a lot of jobs that were created, and I know there are a lot of jobs created under the Ontario Liberal Party, but I'm excited for our plan for transit, for infrastructure. We're committed to not cancel any plans that are currently committed under our current government when it comes to transit and infrastructure. We will continue with those plans, including the BEAR. However, we will also conduct an environmental impact assessment to ensure that all of these plans are as environmentally sound as the Doug Ford Conservatives claim them to be. And lastly, we also will include transportation in our plan, slashing fares by $1, something that no one has committed to do. Thank you.
Final response on this original question on the BEAR, the Belleville East Arterial Route. Candidate Kelly, you have 1 minute starting now.
I will repeat what I said earlier. If Bradford Bypass and 413 happen, you will not get the funding from the Conservatives to do this project, and you know that. You know that. Bradford Bypass and specifically is diverting its original route to go through the Greenbelt. We need to prioritize people and the government and the environment before rich people. Rich people are doing pretty good. They did pretty good in this in this pandemic. So, will we continue it? We talked to Mayor Panchak. I know it's important. But again, it won't happen if those other two projects do. And an announcement that was made by the NDPs just yesterday, we are going to be moving to eliminate the cost of truck drivers to be using Highway 407. If you eliminate that costly price for this privatized highway, you can move people off the highways of the 401, of the other public highways, and make it less.
And that's time. Thank you. Just one small note, you use the word you. When you make a statement, please address it generally. That makes it seem like you're addressing it or going at that specific candidate. Thank you. Yes. Next question is on youth opportunities, something we're all intimately connected to. How will your government provide opportunities for youth to participate in one of the essential rituals of growing up in Ontario, that being home ownership? First to answer this question, candidate Smith, you have 1 minute starting now.
Well, building more homes, Paul, that's really what it comes down to, and building homes of all sizes. I have 2 daughters that are 19 and 21. I want them to be able to buy a home here in the Quinte region. One thing that's interesting when I talk to my daughters, and this is very anecdotal, is that they don't necessarily care if they have a big single family home. We need starter homes. We need ability for them to build some equity, and that could come in the form of a townhouse. Or my one daughter is very anxious about potentially buying a tiny home one day, just to start to build the equity that she needs. And we've allowed tiny homes to be built. And as a matter of fact, the first project is underway in Kingston right now to build tiny homes. Rental housing is important. We're building rental housing. I believe I mentioned that earlier, but we need housing of all kinds. It's really important for the young people to be able to build the equity to get into the home ownership market. And the one way we can do that is by building more and building more of all types of housing.
Thank you. Second to respond to this question, candidate Lenavue. You have 1 minute starting now.
I agree that we need to build more homes. We want to build 1.5 million homes over 10 years. We want 183,000 of those homes to be deeply affordable homes, which means that they are going to be 40% less than the market value in the region that these homes exist in. But as a younger candidate who's worked very hard with several jobs, like some of my counterparts, I had 3 jobs as well before coming on to this stage and before entering the RIT period. And I don't know if I will ever own a home. I've worked very hard as a biotechnologist. I still have student loans that unfortunately have been converted to grants thanks to the Ford administration. But I know if we work together and we work on increasing affordability for everyone, particularly our youth, and we stop penalizing youth for going to education and increasing their knowledge by changing or by converting loans or grants to loans, by not freezing tuition caps during a pandemic, and by not doubling the grants during such an unprecedented time. We need to focus on our youth. We need life to be affordable for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Third response, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
I'm in a very unique position. For 2 years, I worked at a youth center in Prince Edward County. And before I worked there, I was very oblivious to how things were so hard for our students and for our youth. Their figurative life is on fire, meaning they're dealing with homelessness, some of them. They're dealing with their parents struggling because they lost their jobs during the pandemic. They're dealing with food insecurity. They're dealing with mental health. Many of these kids have self-harm behavior and are contemplating suicide. They don't see a future. They don't see themselves in our community. So we need to do something to help them. I talked to a student yesterday, a youth, who told me they were so embarrassed because they had to come back and move into their parents' home. Unacceptable. So one thing we're going to do, you asked about first-time homeowners, we are going to provide a 10% purchase price for your down payment. We're going to work with you. We're going to help you. Those who are renting, we're going to provide subsidies. We're going to help you.
And that's time. Thank you. Final response to this question, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
Thanks so much. A great thing about our youth is they're open-minded, and we have an opportunity with them to mold them for a new future. What you're suggesting, this ritual of buying your own home, is based on the idea that one day you'll be able to afford a single family unit outside of the city with your own space. And the reality is that is based on a limited resource theology. We can't keep building outside of our cities. What we need to do is create vibrant, engaging, small communities where people want to be, where they know that they can walk to work or walk to the local store. What we need to do is change the mindset. Looking at duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, more affordable ways that people can enter into their homes and not have to worry if whether or not they're going to be able to afford it. By putting up affordable units now, people, especially our youth, are going to be able to save for the future. And if that means buying a home, good for them. Thanks.
Our second last question, and this is more personal, a chance for people to get to know more you as a person. How do you and how would you balance being in the spotlight with maintaining a personal life separate from the job? First to respond to this question, candidate Lonavue. You have 1 minute starting now.
Well, ever since I first started at Loyalist, I have balanced being on the volleyball team, being in academics, my studies, having several jobs at once. To everyone's point, affordability is so low right now in the Bay of Quinte, Ontario. Everyone needs to have multiple jobs, or a lot of people need to have multiple jobs. So I can say that I've been balancing for the last few years, or almost the last decade living here, growing up in Frankfurt. I've been balancing a job, multiple jobs, being on a volleyball team, being on multiple teams, being a coach of a volleyball team, being a delegate for the Canada-wide Science Fair students, who I do want to give a shout out to, our Quinte Regional Science and Technology Fair students. Last night during our debate had their award ceremony, and they did extremely well representing the Bay of Quinte, getting a gold and a bronze medal. But to get back to the question, I strongly believe that I've been living a life where I have been balancing everything that was in that question, and I hope I have the opportunity to do that as soon as June 3rd, because I am ready to work as soon as June 3rd. Thank you.
Second to respond to this question, candidate Kelly. You have 1 minute starting now.
1 minute. In 2017, I was laid off from my job in Toronto because I was challenging pay equity. And let me tell you, I was rip-roaring livid. But what it did is it gave me an opportunity to understand the privilege I had been living in for so long. I thought my life was hard, but then I started looking into my community and seeing how terrible it is for so many people. I got involved in volunteering at the local radio station. I now sit on the board of the Rock Youth Center. I'm a school board trustee. I sit on the accessibility committee at Prince Edward County. I'm also on the board of directors at Alpaca, Ontario. And I have 3 jobs, and I'm raising kids. But you know what? I'm a Gemini, so I like to think this is what I need to do. But at the end of the day, it's being grounded. It's surrounding yourself with good people who know you're doing this for the good reasons, and looking at the faces of my kids every day and knowing this is why I'm doing this. It's for them. It's for their future. And if I don't do this, we're in trouble.
That's time. Thank you. Fourth response, candidate Charlton. You have 1 minute starting now.
I'd like to let you get to know me a bit better, but I'm actually quite a private person. I have spent my entire working career going to my job, doing the best job that I can, and coming home. And when I'm home, I take care of my family, I garden, and I play outside. When I say that I wouldn't mind being in the spotlight, I know that it means that when I am in the spotlight, I'm going to be doing the best job that I can. And when I'm not, I'm going to be taking whatever efforts I can to make sure that I am a friend of the environment. If it means I need to bike to the grocery store, or if it means that I need to till my lawn by hand because I don't want to run a gas-powered machine to do it, that's what I'm going to do. And that work-life balance is important because we need to make sure that people have the opportunity when they step away from work that they do things that empower them and are going to help them long term, and that's where I'm at.
Final response to this question, candidate Smith. You have 1 minute starting now.
Well, I have some experience in this, and not because of the last 11 years necessarily in politics, although that has helped. But prior to that, as a broadcaster right here on your TV, I mean, calling Belleville Bulls games for as many years as I did, and being a public figure on our local radio stations, and getting to know so many people in so many different community organizations and business people. One of the things, should you get the opportunity to do this, is when you have children, people come up to them all the time and they say, "You must be Todd Smith's daughter." Or more often, because my wife is a very well-known educator in the region, they say, "You must be Tanya Smith's daughter." It drives them crazy because they are Peyton and Reagan first. But it's just part of life, being in the various jobs that I've had. I really love it. We have an amazing community, one of the most giving communities, and really, so many causes are supported by the people in our community, and it's a pleasure to represent all of them and get to know them.
That's time. Thank you. We have just a couple of minutes left, which is not time for more full questions, so we'll have one that's a little bit more informal. I will ask you to limit your responses to 30 seconds, and this will be your final question. People always talk about getting life back to normal now in the supposed aftermath of the pandemic. What do you think is the single biggest key to doing it, and can we get back to the normal we knew before? I'll limit your response to 30 seconds, please. Answering first, candidate Kelly. You have 30 seconds starting now.
So we need to be careful when we say get back to normal, because as the pandemic showed, the system as it is now doesn't work for everyone. There are many people in our community who still can't leave their homes because they are unable to be vaccinated, or they have some accessibility problems. So getting back to normal is understanding and reaching out to those to understand everybody's needs. The needs of the people in our communities who are struggling, not the wealthy developers. We get back to normal by changing that language.
And that's time. Thank you. Second response, 30 seconds. Candidate Charlton, please begin.
I'd like to say that there's a new normal. During the pandemic, we became cognizant that the system that we had wasn't working and will not continue to work. That's why with the Green Party of Ontario, we want to develop communities. We want people to engage with each other by shopping locally, live locally, and be able to travel together on transit systems. The new normal is going to be better than the old normal, and that's what we want. Thank you.
Third response, candidate Smith, a reminder, 30 seconds starting now.
Well, we have to remain open, and we are getting back to normal, but we have to continue to follow the science as well. It's getting back to community events like the one I was at yesterday, the Back to Build celebration, where they've reached their fundraising goal to build that new Prince Edward County Memorial Hospital, and so many other charitable events in our region, and get back to talking to each other without masks on your face. If you want to wear one, that's great, but we have to get back to normalcy, and keeping our economy open, keeping our community open, getting back to those great events in our region is important.
Thank you. Final response, candidate Lenavue. You have 30 seconds starting now.
If I can answer the question with a question, what even is normal? I think we also need to challenge that our new normal, and that normalcy for everyone is different. Normal for everyone is different. But I also think that we need to learn from the pandemic. We need to host hybrid events. We need to ensure that we're giving back to our economy and the environment by learning the things that we've learned through virtualization. And I think it's imperative that we recognize, again, that everyone's normal is different, and we can challenge the way that we restore that. Thank you.
We now advance into the closing statements, and I'd like to thank all of our candidates for being part of the event today. First, with their closing thoughts, candidate Charlton, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the land that we're on for the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Kanekahaka peoples. We have to share this land. The Green Party of Ontario is committed to the reconciliation by consulting Indigenous peoples with the protection of Ontario. Up to 30% of Ontario protected by 2030. And that's just one step. Right now, we have an opportunity more than ever. We need change to happen, and we want change to happen. But not only that, the climate crisis is depending on us to make the changes that we need to make today to ensure that our family and children and grandchildren have a future. Not just what it looks like and what social services are available, but if it exists or not. I don't want to talk about impending doom, I want to talk about hope. So when you look at our leaders and we look at the leaders of these parties, I want you to see who is inspiring hope, who is answering questions with real solutions, who's taking the time to come up with plans and action, costed plans, to make real change happen for everybody and guarantee that we have a future together. Mike Schreiner is the leadership that we need for Ontario right now. He is doing wonders as a single MPP in Queen's Park. And he's doing it by what we should all be doing here, working together, working across party lines, because it's not just the opinion of one or the other. It's everybody. We are a diverse community in Ontario, and we have lots of changing and very different opinions on certain things. But one thing we can all agree on is that we love it here. It's beautiful here, and we will do anything to protect the place that we call home, and we're going to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Green Party candidate Erica Charlton. Second closing statement, NDP candidate Allison Kelly. You have 2 minutes starting now.
Thank you, Paul, and your Quinte TV for inviting me to share space with you and with you at home today. To be blunt, there's a lot at stake in this election. Doug Ford and his bad policies only benefit his rich buddies. Doug Ford cares more about increasing subsidies for long-term care private providers instead of investing in PSWs and nurses and you. Doug Ford has prioritized a highway to nowhere to make his developer buddies very rich instead of properly investing in education and healthcare. We have an opportunity to really make a difference that put people first. That isn't just going to help people now, but put fundamental pieces in place that are going to help for generations to come. We need an empathetic leader, desperately, to understand when you're implementing policies, they need to be sure those policies actually help the people they're meant to serve. Bay of Quinte deserves better than what we've been getting. So I say to our neighbors in this beautiful part of Ontario, let's come together now to defeat Doug Ford and urgently start to fix the things that really matter to you. I care about your life, and I will work with you. I'll go to bat for you every single day. On June 2nd, choose me, Allison Kelly, as your next Bay of Quinte MPP. Thank you.
Thank you. Third closing statement, representing the Liberal Party in the Bay of Quinte riding, Emily Lanavue. You have 2 minutes starting now.
Thank you so much, Paul, for moderating this evening, and to my fellow candidates for sharing space, to your TV, and to everyone watching at home or online potentially. I want to thank you all for spending time to really focus on the key issues, to listen about our platforms, and to invest your time in democracy. I think it's potentially one of the best things we can do. I want to shed a little bit of light on the Ontario Liberal Party platform and how it was created or how it first came about. Stephen Del Duca, our leader, called all candidates and he asked us what our priorities were. We were then put into teams. I was fortunate enough to be on the team of energy, environment, and climate change, looking at some of the mistakes that were made in the last 4 years and how we can build upon that plan. Holding countless dozens of consultation meetings with stakeholders to make sure that we're not only learning from our past Liberal mistakes, but from every single government that came before us to make sure that we have a plan that works for everyone and can increase affordability. We've spent the last 4 years making all the wrong choices. We can prioritize Highway 413 to some of our points, which is a highway to nowhere, a highway that's going to save cottage commuters 30 seconds on their commute. Or we can spend that entire $10 billion in education, in our youth, in the next generation that needs the tools to use their talents to succeed. Because everyone in the Bay of Quinte, everyone across Ontario truly does have the talent to succeed. But we aren't giving our youth or anyone the tools they need. And I look forward to amplifying all voices, not just youth, as soon as June 3rd, because I am ready to work as soon as we conclude this writ period. After June 2nd, I am ready to work for the Bay of Quinte and Ontario. I ask that on June 2nd or in the advance polls, you consider voting for Emily Lanavue in the Ontario Liberal Party. As a vote for Emily Lanavue is a vote for education, equity, the environment, and economic dignity for everyone. Thank you so much. Un gros merci à tout le monde. Bonsoir.
And with our final closing statement, PC candidate Todd Smith. You have 2 minutes starting now.
Well, thanks, Paul, and thanks for doing another great job as our moderator, and thanks to Colin for keeping us all on time, and your TV, Quinte, as well, for hosting this all candidates debate. I've been the MPP for Prince Edward Hastings and Bay of Quinte now for 11 years. The first 7 years in opposition were incredibly difficult. We saw rural Ontario being left behind. Here are just a few of the examples of projects that we've seen in Bay of Quinte. We've stabilized the funding formula in the last 4 years to ensure that Quinte Healthcare has 4 well-funded operating hospitals. They're going to be around for the long term. People in Trenton no longer have to worry about Trenton Memorial Hospital closing its doors as they did under the previous Liberal government. We've got a brand new Prince Edward County Memorial Hospital that's on the way. We had a great celebration yesterday at the Crystal Palace in Picton. We're going to get shovels in the ground on that new historic hospital and a very innovative hospital in 2024. We're going to build 4 new long-term care facilities and ensure that they have the staffing that they need, training nurses and PSWs and doctors locally in the Quinte region to meet those primary health care needs that we have. We've got a brand new YMCA for Belleville in the development pipeline that's going to be built up by the old Agricultural Society grounds off Sydney Street. We fixed and created a brand new gateway into the city by widening Bell Boulevard, so it's ready for the economic development that we know is going to occur there. And we've got the BEAR, the Belleville East arterial route, and the widening of the 401 to 6 lanes all the way through Quinte in our budget. We're going to get that done because we know we're going to see people with bigger jobs and better paychecks in our region because of the economic development that we're experiencing through Quinte Economic Development. There are so many other things I haven't had the time to mention, like Quinte Hospice or the Quinte Humane Society, but I want to continue to work with the people in Quinte to ensure that we get the results that we need and we deserve. June 2nd, vote for Todd Smith.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to get to know your candidates here in the Bay of Quinte region. Democracy is so important. You've dedicated some time now, but you still have something to do. On June 2nd or before, get out and cast your ballot for the future of the province. This has been your vote on your TV, and I've been your moderator for this event, Paul Martin.